Welcome to Starbound. My name is I Am Duck, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspy Academy and Freyrin and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's story. It was both the galaxy's greatest secret and a trump card that many species kept locked away in the deepest vaults. As the newly elected council leader, President Savaro was about to learn from the former president himself why human DNA was secured under the highest security protocols. The corridor stretched endlessly before them, a tunnel of black metal that seemed to swallow light itself. President Savaro followed the hunched figure of former President Griaro, his predecessor's footsteps creating an unsettling rhythm against the floor. Tap, tap, scrape. Tap, tap, scrape. Despite being of the same species, Savaro found himself unable to read the cunning old Gloarian's intentions. The rows upon rows of stationed guards lining every wall did nothing to ease his growing unease. Their armor gleamed dully in the minimal lighting, faces hidden behind opaque visors, weapons held at perfect attention. Not a single guard moved as the two presidents passed, but Savaro could feel their eyes tracking every movement through those dark face shields. The deeper they descended into what Savaro could only assume was some kind of military installation, the darker it became. Emergency strips along the floor provided just enough illumination to avoid stumbling, but little else. In this oppressive darkness, the shining tips of Savaro's head tentacles became the primary source of light, casting shadows on the walls as they shone with a bioluminescent glow. Each tentacle tip emitted light with the vibrant blue-green of a healthy Gloarian in their prime, creating small pools of light that moved with him like loyal companions. In obvious contrast, Griaro's own tentacles hung limp and dull, their once brilliant tips now reduced to the faintest glimmer, like dying stars barely visible through cosmic dust. The difference in their vitality was crystal clear here in the dark space, away from the forgiving artificial lights of the council chambers, where Savaro's tentacles moved with fluid grace, responding to his every thought and emotion with bright flashes. Griaro's dragged behind him like dead weight. It was a sobering reminder of what awaited all Gloarians in their twilight years. The silence between them grew heavy, pressing down on Savaro like the tons of rock and metal above their heads. He cleared his throat, a wet, clicking sound that echoed off the walls, and searched desperately for something to say. Should he comment on the weather? No, they were deep underground. Perhaps ask about Griaro's plans for retirement. That seemed insensitive, given the obvious deterioration of his tentacles. Maybe inquire about the Council's recent trade negotiations with the Altarian Collective.
The awkwardness is quite clear, isn't it?
Griaro's voice cut through the darkness, raspy but amused.
You're trying so hard to think of something appropriate to say to the old fossil you're replacing.
Griaro paused his steps for a moment, his blue eyes focusing on Savaro, a gaze of old wisdom that seemed able to pierce through his loose official presidential garments, his grey skin, and lock to his soul. Savaro's tentacles flashed in embarrassment, momentarily brightening the corridor. I didn't mean to.
Oh, spare me the platitudes, young one.
Griaro interrupted with what might have been a chuckle. though with Glowarians it sounded more like grinding gears.
It's only natural for the young to replace the old. Even those at the very top of the galactic hierarchy are not immune to this rule. I've held this position for 20 cycles. My tentacles have dimmed. My thoughts have slowed. The Council needs fresh bioluminescence, so to speak.
I'm honored by the Council's trust, Savaro ventured carefully. But I must admit, I'm curious about what secret you're showing me here. Why wasn't I briefed about this facility yesterday with all the other classified information? They had spent the entire previous day in the secure briefing rooms, where Savaro had learnt about everything from his locations of strategic antimatter arsenal to the real reason behind the Nexus 2 incident. His head still swam with secrets that could destabilize entire star systems if revealed, yet here was something else, something that warranted a personal escort to a facility he hadn't even known existed. Griaro's pace never slowed as he gestured with one arm toward the massive vault door that had just become visible at the corridor's end. It was a monstrous thing, circular and at least 20 meters in diameter, composed of what looked like layers upon layers of different metals and energy shields.
You'll learn everything soon enough. Some secrets, President Savaro, cannot be conveyed through briefings or data packets. Some must be witnessed to be truly understood.
The vault door loomed before them, like the entrance to some mechanical underworld. As they approached, Savaro could make out the intricate details of its construction, the outermost layer appearing to be traditional Delarium steel, thick enough to withstand a direct hit from a plasma cannon. Beneath that, visible through transparent sections, lay a mesh of particles that would make teleportation or phasing through impossible. Energy fields shimmered between the physical layers. He counted at least 6 different types, including a probability dampener that would prevent any prescient species from seeing what lay beyond. Griaro approached a console that rose from the floor at their arrival. His dim head tentacles spread across multiple input surfaces as he began the complex unlocking sequence. First came the biometric scans, not just DNA, but chronological DNA, to ensure the subject had been cloned or time displaced. Then the consciousness verification, probing to confirm that Griaro's mind hadn't been compromised by psychic influence or technological override. The old president submitted to each test with impressive patience. "Security level confirmed," an artificial voice announced. "President Griaro, you are authorized for entry, detecting additional presence."
President-elect Savaro, Glowarian, assuming office in 6 standard rotations, Griaro stated. Full authorization transfer, protocol Gamma 9.
More scans swept over Savaro. Some he recognized, others employing technology he couldn't identify. The sensation was unpleasant, like having his very atoms counted and catalogued. "Identity confirmed. Warning, this is a Constitution-level security zone. Entry will be logged in permanent records. Proceed?"
"Proceed,"
both presidents said in unison. The massive door began its opening sequence. First, the energy fields powered down in a specific order. Savaro noticed that shutting them down randomly would trigger a catastrophic feedback loop. Then came the physical unlocking. Massive bolts retracted with thunderous clangs. Pressure seals hissed as they equalized. And finally the door itself began to iris open. It took a full 3 minutes for the process to complete, during which neither president spoke. Beyond the door lay an antechamber with yet another security checkpoint. This one required them to pass through a decontamination field that Savaro recognized as designed to eliminate any form of biological or technological contamination. Their clothes, such as Glowarians wore, were scanned down to the molecular level. A second door, smaller but no less formidable than the first, blocked their way forward. "Initiating final security protocol," the AI announced. "Please state the purpose of your visit."
"Continuation of executive order," Griaro responded. "Transfer of classified knowledge to incoming administration."
The door opened more quickly, revealing a chamber that took Savaro's breath away. The room beyond was vast, far larger than the entrance suggested. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and the walls seemed to extend endlessly in every direction. But it wasn't the size that shocked Savaro. It was the contents. Rows upon rows of individual glass containers filled the space, each holding a single vial. The containers were clearly cryogenic, frost patterns decorating their surfaces, and a subtle mist drifted along the floor from the cooling systems. The vials themselves were small, no larger than Savaro's smallest fingertip, but they were arranged neatly, thousands of them, tens of thousands. Savaro walked forward in absolute silence, his glowing tentacles casting eerie reflections off the frozen glass. Each container bore a label with numbers and codes he couldn't decipher. Some sections were marked with additional warnings, biohazard symbols, chronological distortion alerts, even some markings he didn't recognize. He wandered deeper into the room, following pathways between the container rows. Here and there he noticed some vials were missing, their containers standing empty like gaps in teeth. Others showed signs of recent access, less frost, disturbed dust patterns. The organization was meticulous. Someone had put enormous thought into this cataloging system. After several minutes of silent exploration, Savaro returned to where Griaro waited near the entrance. His voice carried out louder than he intended. "What is the meaning of this?" The old president's expression was unreadable, his dim tentacles hanging still near his ears. He spoke two words that sent a chill through Savaro's entire being. "Human blood." The words lingered in the air like a physical presence. Savaro's tentacles flashed rapidly in confusion, cycling through colors that would have communicated his bewilderment to any Glowarian observer. "Human blood," he repeated, his voice rising. "How does human blood warrant this level of security? Why is there a vault filled with human blood in this place? What possible purpose? Who authorized this? When was this?" "Patience." Griaro raised one appendage, his tone surprisingly gentle. "I will tell you everything, the full story, but you must listen carefully, for this knowledge will define much of your presidency." The old president moved to one of the nearest compartments, entering a code that Savaro noticed was different from the main vault access. The individual container's shields powered down, and Griaro carefully extracted a single vial. The blood within was frozen solid, dark red like crystallized rubies. He held it up to the light of Savaro's tentacles, and the frozen blood seemed to capture and reflect back the bioluminescence in disturbing patterns. "The story begins in the distant past," Griaro began, his head tentacles moving slowly, close to his forehead. "When humanity had just made first contact with the Galactic Council, the trouble and the danger to the entire galaxy began with this red fluid." He rotated the vial slowly, letting Savaro see it from every angle.
Humans as a species were an oddity from the beginning. They were careless with their genetic material, like no other spacefaring race we had encountered. Everywhere they went, they left traces. Strands of hair caught on chairs, drops of blood from minor injuries, saliva on drinking vessels, skin cells, and, he paused delicately, other biological materials. They shed their DNA constantly, seemingly without thought or concern.
Savaro leaned closer, his blue eyes focusing on the vial while his grey skin tensed. What's so special about human DNA? Many species leave biological traces. Griaro's laugh was almost hysterical, a sound like grinding metal that echoed through the vault. When he finally controlled himself, his next words were delivered with deadly seriousness.
Human DNA, young President, represents the most perfect warrior genetic template the galaxy has ever known. Virtually every pacifist species, every race that evolved without natural fighting instincts, every civilization that relied on technology or diplomacy rather than physical prowess, they all came to the same conclusion. If they needed an army, if they required soldiers, if they wanted protectors or enforcers, they didn't need to look further than humanity's genetic code. The replication technology was already widespread, Griaro continued, beginning to pace near the wall with the vial still in his grasp. Most advanced species could grow a fully formed adult from genetic material within a few months. Some could do it in weeks. The moment they analyzed human DNA, they realized what they had found. Humans possessed a unique combination of traits, exceptional pattern recognition that made them brilliant strategists, physical durability that let them survive in almost any environment, rapid healing that kept them fighting when other species would have died, and most importantly, an aggressive instinct that could be channeled into protective behavior with the right conditioning.
But this is known history, Savaro interrupted, his tentacles dimming with disappointment. Every schoolchild learns about the replication crisis. It doesn't explain why the Galactic Council maintains this vault with such extreme security measures. Griaro's aged features contorted into something that might have been frustration.
I'm getting there, impatient youth. You need to understand the full scope to appreciate our current situation.
He replaced the vial and began walking deep into the vault, forcing Savaro to follow.
There was a period, the old president continued, roughly 40 standard years after humanity joined the Galactic Council, where essentially every species with replication technology possessed their own human armies. The Altarians grew thousands of human soldiers in their lunar facilities. The Bendathi were trying to program human minds with absolute loyalty instincts. Even the philosophical Zephrani, who hadn't engaged in warfare for millennia, quietly developed a defensive force of replicated humans.
How did humanity allow this? Savaro asked, unable to contain his curiosity. Griaro's tentacles moved from side to side in what Savaro recognized as mild irritation at another's interruption. But the old president continued.
Humanity at the time was not the force it is today. They had only recently achieved faster than light travel. Their population was still primarily confined to one star system, and they lacked the political or military power to prevent their genetic material from being weaponized. Oh, they protested, filed formal complaints with the Council, even threatened to withdraw from the galactic community. But what could they really do against the combined might of 100 spacefaring civilization?
The old president paused at an intersection of pathways, gesturing down various directions.
This section contains samples from the Altarian hybrid experiments. That row documents the Bendathi loyalty protocols. Over there, the Mechanists Collective's attempts to create cybernetic human fusions. His voice dropped lower. The situation nearly culminated in humanity's complete rebellion against the Council centuries ago. They were preparing to declare war on every species that had replicated their kind. The destruction would have been catastrophic. But that's not the story we're here for today.
Is this all then? Savaro asked, disappointment evident in his bioluminescent display. Human DNA is protected at this level simply because it was once used as a weapon template.
Fool!
Griaro spat, his tentacles flaring with more light than Savaro had seen from them since they'd entered the facility.
Not a weapon, the weapon. Listen carefully, young President, for this is the crux of your responsibility.
The old Gloarian composed himself before continuing.
Humans could be replicated for more than just battlefield soldiers. Their cognitive flexibility made them ideal war strategists. Entire campaigns were planned by replicated human minds. Their innovative thinking revolutionized weapons technology. Human engineers designed 70% of the current generation's military hardware. They could be integrated at every level of society to contribute to war efforts, intelligence gathering, logistics, propaganda, even leadership. Replicated humans excelled at every aspect of warfare. The only challenge,
Griaro said, his voice dropping to a low whisper,
was control.
Pure humans, even those grown in vats and programmed from birth, possessed an intrinsic independence that made them difficult to manage. Many species struggled with this. The Kolathi lost an entire colony when their human army decided their creators were the real enemy. The pristine Commonwealth saw their replicated humans simply walk away one day, returning to Earth for asylum. Some civilians tried genetic modifications to increase obedience, but these often reduced the very qualities that made humans valuable as warriors. Only a few species ever succeeded in maintaining large human forces without eventual rebellion. The most successful? Griaro's expression showed something like admiration. A relatively primitive species called the Threnodi. They possessed no genetic engineering capabilities, no neural programming, no technological restraints whatsoever. They simply raised their replicated humans as family members from a young age, as beloved children and siblings, and for nearly a century, they fielded one of the most powerful human military forces outside of the Sol system. Though we can argue that their own identity as a species was lost in the process, with so many humans living among them. If humans were so useful for warfare, Savaro interjected, why did the galaxy stop using them? Griaro settled his bulk against a support pillar, clearly preparing for another lengthy explanation.
Humanity's response to the weaponization of their genome was decisive. When diplomatic protests failed, they began targeting operations against replication facilities. Not military strikes, something far more subtle. They infiltrated the facilities, not to destroy them, but to alter them. Every replicated human being emerging with a biological imperative to seek out Earth, to return home as they called it. The economic drain as entire armies abandoned their posts was catastrophic.
But that was just the beginning, the old president continued.
humanity issued an ultimatum. Cease all human replication or face the consequences. Some species complied immediately. Others did not. The Vareshi hegemony refused, claiming sovereign rights to use whatever genetic material they possessed. Within one standard year, the Vareshi were defeated in combat and forced to obey. The message was clear for the other species. Zavaro's tentacles had gone pale with shock. Humanity killed them. They demonstrated capability, Griaro corrected. After the Vareshi incident, compliance was nearly universal, but humanity understood that the temptation would always exist, so they negotiated the current treaty. Only 3 non-human civilizations are permitted to maintain human populations, under very specific conditions. The old president began walking again, leading Zavaro to a different section of the vault. 2 of those species, the Melodi and the Kess, developed hybrid programs, mixing their own DNA with the human genetics to create new subspecies. These hybrids possess some human advantages while maintaining connections to their parent species. The 3rd authorized exception is the Threnodi, who continue their practice of raising humans with their family units. These arrangements required nearly a century of philosophical and ethical debate within humanity to approve, Griaro explained. They were only permitted because in all cases, the replicated humans and hybrids are guaranteed full human rights under galactic law, including the unconditional option to emigrate to Earth or any human colony at any time. Humanity's primary concern was preventing the separation of families. They recognized that beings raised as Threnodi, for instance, might genuinely prefer to remain with their adoptive species. These 3 species now exist effectively under humanity's protection, forming a semi-autonomous alliance that operates parallel to, but separate from the Galactic Council. They've become, in many ways, part of the extended human civilization, trusted allies who, in some ways, are a part of humanity now. They had arrived at a section marked with additional warnings and more recent access logs. Zavaro studied the patterns, his analytical mind processing the implications. So now I understand why the Council maintains this repository of human DNA. It's a strategic reserve, a safeguard against potential future conflicts where human military capability might be necessary for survival. That's partially correct, Griaro confirmed. Every sample here is catalogued, its source documented, its genetic profile analyzed. In the event of an existential threat to the galaxy, something that endangered all species, including humanity, the Council could, theoretically, approach humanity for permission to activate these reserves. Zavaro's tentacles flickered with a new concern. But I'm slightly worried about the secret itself. What would happen if humanity were to discover that we're keeping human DNA stored here? They've been very clear about their position on unauthorized replication. The question lingered in the air between them, heavy with implications. Griaro's expression was unreadable as he considered his response, while around them thousands of frozen vials continued their silent vigil, each one containing the potential for an army, or a diplomatic disaster of unimaginable proportions. Griaro's aged features shifted into what might have been amusement. We have contingency plans to avoid angering humanity, young president. Protocols within protocols. But it's too soon to worry about such matters. His dim tentacles gestured deeper into the vault. There's one more secret you need to know.
The words sent a fresh wave of anxiety through Savaro's neural clusters. His tentacles, which had been gradually dimming as he processed the enormity of the DNA repository, suddenly flared with nervous brightness. Another secret, in this place that already defied his understanding of council security measures. His stomach churned, a deeply uncomfortable sensation that only occurred during extreme stress. The old president moved with surprising speed toward what appeared to be a blank section of wall. Zavaro watched as Griaro leaned close, aligning his primary optical organs with a nearly invisible scanner embedded in the metal. A thin calibrated beam of red light, using a specific frequency their bioluminescence could not replicate, traced the unique patterns in the old Gluarian's eyes, penetrating deep enough to read the microcapillaries that formed a signature as unique as any genetic code. With a soft hiss that seemed too quiet for such massive construction, a section of the wall receded and slid aside. Beyond lay another chamber, smaller than the vast DNA repository, but somehow more ominous in its compact purposefulness. In the main vault was a library. This hidden room was a shrine. Zavaro took tentative steps toward the opening, his head tentacles shone at maximum brightness, an involuntary response to the unknown that painted wild shadows on the walls. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the gravity itself increased the closer he got to whatever final revelation awaited him. The doorway seemed to swallow his light, giving back nothing but darkness. Then he crossed the threshold, and his repository systems froze momentarily. 3 water tanks dominated the room, each a translucent cylinder reaching from floor to ceiling. The walls of the tanks were made of some material that blurred details while still allowing shapes to be discerned, like looking through frozen mist. Each tank was filled with a pale green liquid that moved with subtle currents, suggesting active circulation and filtration systems, and suspended in each tank, held in perfect stasis by the mysterious fluid, was a figure. Utter silence enveloped Savaro as he approached. Even the omnipresent vibration of the vault's cooling systems seemed muted here. His tentacles had dimmed to their lowest sustainable level, as if afraid that too much light might disturb whatever slept in those tanks. The first tank drew him like a gravity well. Inside floated what was undoubtedly a human. Their basic bipedal form was unmistakable even through the translucent barrier. The figure was suspended with arms slightly spread, head tilted back, dark hair floating like seaweed in the preservation fluid. Savaro moved around the tank, trying to discern more details, but the blurring effect of the cylinder walls made it impossible to determine even basic characteristics like gender. The human seemed peaceful, almost meditative in repose, but there was something deeply unsettling about seeing one of the galaxy's most feared warrior species rendered so vulnerable. A grinding laugh echoed through the chamber. Savaro turned to see Griaro watching him with what could only be described as sardonic pleasure. The old president's tentacles, despite their dimness, managed to convey amusement as Savaro moved to inspect the second cylinder. This tank contained something that challenged his understanding. The basic structure was humanoid, bipedal, similar proportions, recognizable limb configuration, but from head to toe the creature was covered in vibrant purple fur that rippled in the circulating fluid. Even through the translucent glass, Savaro could make out a long tail that curved around the figure's legs, ending in what appeared to be a tuft of darker fur. Most striking were the hands. Each finger terminated in a claw that was easily as long as a standard human digit. This was no mere human. This was something else. something that spoke of genetic manipulation or hybrid vigor. The third cylinder contained another bipedal form, but this one appeared softer than both the human and the purple-furred creature. Its body possessed an elongated grace, with limbs that seemed to flow rather than simply connect. The skin, if it was skin, had a pearlescent quality that reflected Savaro's tentacle light in gentle ways. The head was larger in proportion to the body than a human's, with features that suggested a calm presence despite their alien configuration. There was something almost ethereal about this being, as if it existed partially in some other dimension.
"Your confusion is delicious," Griaro finally said, breaking the spell of silence. "But I'll ease one of your concerns. These three are not clones, so that is one less worry for you if this secret is ever exposed to humanity."
Savaro's primary voice organ struggled to form words. What are they?
"Volunteers,"
Griaro replied, moving to stand between Savaro and the tanks.
"The one on the right is pure human, unmodified, baseline genetics. The center contains a Melody hybrid, one of the approved fusion experiments I mentioned. And on the left, a Kess hybrid, representing the other unauthorized genetic combination."
Before Zavaro could fully process this information, Griaro continued, his voice taking on the weight of final revelation.
"These three loyal servants of the Council represent the biggest secret about our human DNA repository. You see, young President, in the event that you yourself are assassinated during your term of office,"
Savaro's tentacles flashed in alarm.
"an AI system will automatically activate one of these three to serve as the new president of the Galactic Council."
The words hit him like a blow to his mind. Savaro felt his brain struggling to process the implications, while his primary consciousness reeled. They would become president? He stammered, his mind racing. But how? They would have no knowledge of the current situation.
"An understandable concern,"
Griaro replied, his tone steady.
"Upon awakening, their mind will be imprinted with a sum total of the Council's tactical and political knowledge regarding the crisis via a direct neural interface. Within moments, they will be more informed than any single living being in the galaxy. Then, their selection would be made based on the nature of that crisis."
Griaro explained with disturbing calm.
"If the galaxy requires diplomacy, say, a conflict between member species threatening to tear the Council apart, the Kess hybrid would be awakened. The Kess as a pure race are almost pathologically patient and understanding. Natural mediators, but they're hybrids."
A tentacle gesture toward the ethereal figure.
"They inherit what they call spice from their human genetics. Enough aggression to make hard decisions. Enough human unpredictability to break deadlocks. The perfect diplomatic president. You might wonder why we wouldn't simply have another Glowarian ready to succeed you. You must understand, Savaro, our species' greatest strength, our instinct for consensus and de-escalation, is also our fatal flaw. In a true crisis, a Glowarian would instinctively seek a compromise that might doom us all. We needed leaders without those restraints."
Savaro's gaze moved to the center tank. And the Melody hybrid?
"The Melody are ambush predators in their base form," Griaro said. "Solitary, antisocial.
patient beyond measure. Poor choices for leadership under normal circumstances, but their hybrids combine those hunting instincts with human pack dynamics. If the galaxy faces an internal crisis, a coup, widespread corruption, infiltration by hostile forces, the Melody hybrid would be awakened. They would hunt down the culprits one by one while maintaining the human capacity for building alliances. An investigator president, if you will. Are they pure human? Savaro asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Griaro's laugh this time was darker, tinged with something that might have been fear. That, young president, is our ultimate loophole, our final protocol. If the galaxy faces an existential threat, something that endangers every species, every world, every living thing we've sworn to protect, then the human is awakened. And here's the beauty of it. As the legitimately appointed president of the Galactic Council, this human would have full authority to make any decision necessary for survival, including the creation of an army of human clones under their direct leadership. The old Glowarian's tentacles glowed brighter than they had in years, as he delivered the final piece of the puzzle. Humanity would have to accept it. They couldn't claim we acted without authorization. You see, their treaty is a artwork of legal text, forbidding any non-human entity from authorizing the mass replication of their genome. By making a human the legitimately appointed president, the authorization would come from a human, holding the highest office in the galaxy. It is a loophole they created themselves, a perfect, politically unassailable solution to an impossible problem. Savaro found himself backing away from the tanks, his mind struggling to encompass the sheer audacity of the plan. 3 beings sleeping in suspension, any one of whom could become the most powerful individual in the galaxy upon his death. The DNA repository suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't just a strategic reserve. It was the raw material for a perfectly authorized army that could be created without violating humanity's treaties. Now you understand, Griaro said softly, watching Savaro's reaction with satisfaction. Why the security here exceeds anything else in Council space. Why even knowing this facility exists is restricted to sitting presidents. These 3 volunteers, and yes, they did volunteer, each for their own reasons, represent the Council's insurance policy against catastrophe. And you, President Savaro, are now the guardian of this secret. They began the long journey back through the vault, past the thousands of frozen samples, through the multiple security checkpoints. As they walked, Griaro offered his final counsel. The humans and the DNA stored here represent our ultimate protocol, to be activated only when the galaxy teeters on the edge of despair. My advice to you, young president, is simple. Never fail. Never allow a situation to deteriorate to the point where these measures become necessary. Because once that threshold is crossed, once one of those 3 awakens to assume your office, the galaxy will have fundamentally changed. They reached the outer door, and Griaro paused, his ancient frame silhouetted against the harsh lighting of the corridor beyond. From this moment forward, the galaxy rests under your responsibility. Every decision you make, every crisis you navigate, every conflict you resolve, all of it serves to keep those 3 sleeping. As for myself, his tentacles dimmed to their usual faint glow. "I have fulfilled my duties. The burden passes to you." As they emerged from the depths of the facility, Savaro felt the weight of his new knowledge pressing down like the mass of a neutron star. The brilliant young Glowarian who had entered the vault full of confidence and curiosity was gone. In his place walked a president who understood that his every action would be measured against the ultimate question. Would his leadership be sufficient to keep humanity's children sleeping in their tanks, or would his failure awaken forces that would reshape the galaxy forever? The guards stood at attention as they passed, unaware that their new president now carried the most dangerous secret in the known universe, and somewhere far behind them, in a room within a vault within a fortress of security, 3 figures floated in eternal suspension, waiting for a catastrophe that everyone hoped would never come.